Hi, everyone. Welcome to another virtual Writing Support Center workshop. My name is Giselle, and today's workshop is titled Using Context to Find Meaning While Reading. If you need strategies that will help you read complicated text with more ease, this workshop is for you. Before we begin, I did want to give you some tips that will help you get the most out of this workshop. If this is your first time attending a WSC workshop, we typically have a worksheet accompanying the workshop. The worksheet will help you process the information in this workshop and internalize what you learn a bit more. You can also give this worksheet to your instructor as proof if they require you to complete a workshop or if they're offering extra credit for workshop completion. There are 2 downloads that you can choose from, either a PDF or Word version of the worksheet. You do not need to fill out both. You just need to pick the one that works best for you. So if you prefer fillable PDF, please download that worksheet. If you prefer to type things out on Word, please download the DocX. Although we can't be together face to face, there are some perks to a recorded workshop. You can pause and rewind as you need to. So, if there's a concept I'm explaining that you need a little bit more time to process, please feel free to rewind or pause whenever that happens. So, a few workshop goals for today's reading workshop. The first one is I'm going to have you reflect on your current reading strategies just so you can understand your process a bit better. The second thing is we're going to define context and identify different types of context clues. You might have heard that term before, context clues, and this workshop is going to help define what those actually are and how to look for them while you read. The third goal is to provide a process for reading through a text by using context clues. So you should walk away from this workshop with a process of how you can use context clues when you read. And the fourth and final goal is to have you experiment with reading using context clues by examining a text you are currently assigned. So you do need something that you're currently reading in one of your classes for this workshop. So you can go ahead and pause here and grab that if you need to, or you can wait until we get to that activity to do so. So, for our opening reflection, you'll be able to complete this on the worksheet. It is the first space on the worksheet. So, you will be answering this reflection there. The reflection reads: what strategies do you currently use in reading a new text? For example, do you take notes, occasionally look up words, or do anything else that helps you understand the reading better? So I'm going to go ahead and have you reflect on these questions. Your reflection should be 4 to 6 sentences long, and it should be a description of how you currently read texts, whether that be for your English class or any other class where you're required to read. So go ahead and pause here, complete that reflection, and once you're done, you can continue the video. Okay, so if you still need more time to write your reflection, please continue pausing and resume once you're finished. So, as we begin this workshop, I'm going to ask the question: what does it mean to use context to find meaning while reading? That's quite a mouthful, so I want to help you understand what that actually means and what we're actually going to be doing in this workshop. Now, there are many reading strategies that will help you better understand a text, and using context is just one of those many strategies. We also have other workshops available about reading strategies. One is about previewing a text, so that's another strategy you can use. But like I said, this workshop is going to focus on how you can use context to help you better understand a reading. So, when reading through text, readers often encounter words or concepts that are unfamiliar to them. You might be reading a hard text and you get to a word and you're unsure of what it means. Now, you can always look up the definition of that word, but if this is a text you're really unfamiliar with, chances are you're going to continue encountering words you don't know. And looking up each word in the dictionary becomes tedious. Even with apps or using the web to look up these definitions, it will still become tedious if it is something that you're unfamiliar with and you keep finding those words that you don't know. So, context actually refers to the text surrounding a word or passage or the conditions that surround something. So, it could be the context a concept is in. So, if you know the context around a concept, that would be considered context. Or more specifically, it's a context of where the word exists. So, if you find a word you don't understand in a reading, the context would be everything around it, the sentences and paragraphs that help you understand what that word might mean. Effective readers use their knowledge of other words in the context and their prior knowledge about a subject to help them understand unfamiliar words and concepts. So, like I said, this is a strategy that people use when reading in unfamiliar text with a lot of unfamiliar words. They use their knowledge of the other words in that context, or they might find a concept that they understand and they'll use their prior knowledge to help bolster their understanding of the reading. So, as we go through this workshop, hopefully you'll walk away with some strategies that will help you become a more effective reader. So, as I said, there's a process for using context clues. Uh, the first the first step is to stop and reread the sentence. So, if you get to a sentence, you don't understand what a word means, stop right there and go back and reread it. Ask yourself, are there any helpful words that come before or after the unfamiliar word? That might help you understand if you can identify any other words that you understand. Step two is to identify the context clues. So, what clues can you gather that will help you uncover the word's meaning? So, we're actually going to go more into what context clues are and the different types of context clues. So, that's step two, which we will go into more depth about. Number three, make an educated guess. So, after you've looked at the context, you've looked at the words you already understand, what do you think the word means? Make that educated guess about it. Step four, check your guess in context. So after you've made that guess, read the sentence again and substitute your definition for the unknown word. Does it still make sense even with your definition added? And number five, don't forget to take notes or write annotations. So, doing this will help you process a reading more effectively if you don't already. This is just a general rule that I always suggest is to always take notes or write annotations. If you don't know what annotations are the notes you write in the margins as you read. And they help you remember certain points when you go back to read through a text. They also help you process as you're reading through the text. We actually have a workshop on how to take annotations. So if you go to the reading skills tab on our workshops page, you can learn more about how to write effective annotations if that's something you're interested in. All right. So as I said for step two, I am going to provide s- the different types of context clues that help find meaning. So even when you encounter an unfamiliar word or concept, you can use a variety of context clues to help you understand the word that you've encountered. So I'm just going to start up here with clarification. So clarification, this is a type of context clue. It's the meaning of the unfamiliar word is restated differently, summarized, or paraphrased. So this is a type of context clue. I'm going to show you examples in a bit, but one way that you can figure out what a clarification, when a clarification is happening, is when you see things like in other words, simply, or clearly. So if you see a phrase starting with that, it's most likely a clarification. The second way that you can use context clues to help you understand a word is to find a definition. So, this is when the unfamiliar word is specifically defined in the sentence or in the preceding or following sentences. Um, Excuse my typo for following. So, what that means is Some signal words that will help you find definitions are which means. So if you see something that says this word, which means, that could be a definition. So sometimes uh, text will define the word for you. There's also commas that set off a qualifying phrase. So if you see commas, for example, you see word and then right next to it in commas is a definition. That's also a version of defining a word. Another context clue are examples. So this is when the unfamiliar word is illustrated by one or more examples. These are easier to spot when you're reading through a text, something like for example, or including, or such as, or even pictures or diagrams are forms of examples and context clues that will help you understand a word more. There's also description, which is characteristics or features of the unfamiliar word are described. So perhaps a word is there, and then next to it are descriptive words or sensory words or adjectives and adverbs that help describe the word. And that would qualify as description. Another context clue is illustration. So this is when the unfamiliar word is shown in a diagram, picture, or map. So this is when you encounter in your textbook something that says see figure 2.1 or graphic features on the page that will show you more about the word. So illustrations tend to be another context clue that you can use to understand a word that you may be unfamiliar with. Another context clue are parenthetical notes. These are the meaning of the unfamiliar word is provided in parentheses directly following the word. So this is also easy to spot. Like I said, it would be parentheses right next to the word with a definition in it, which is another context clue that you can use. There's also comparison. So this is when the meaning of the unfamiliar word is provided by contrasting or comparing it to another word, phrase, or concept. So this happens when you see words like such as, like, compared to, unlike, or similar to. Comparison also can be synonyms or antonyms that are provided about the word. Or charts that show different comparisons. So this is another context clue that's going to help you understand a word that you might have trouble with. Another one is elaboration, which is when additional information about the unfamiliar word is provided in the following sentences and paragraphs. So sometimes you'll be reading and you'll get to that word, you don't understand it, but if you keep reading, later sentences or paragraphs might elaborate further on the word or concept for your understanding. You might find signal words like in addition, another, or consequently that mark where an elaboration is happening. There's also typography in design, which is design features that draw attention to important words and concepts and to their definitions. So these are things like bold and italics in texts that draw your attention to the word. You can also see that sort of context clue in my design, right? So typography and design is definitely drawing your attention to different words and concepts and their definitions. So this is one version of context clues. Too, is if you could just look at the design and it might be trying to tell you where a definition is. So like I said, these are all different types of context clues that will help you find meaning as you're reading. Okay, so here are some examples of the context clues that I just described. So I'm going to give you a sample text on the left, and on the right, I'm going to define which context clue it is. So if it's one of these, I didn't cover each context clue, but I provided examples for um, 6 different context clues that you can look at. So for the first one, this is a sample. Electricity is a form of energy. It is produced by the movement of electrons. So if I'm reading this, I've never read it before. Electricity is the word that I'm curious about, and I don't understand. But the thing is, if I look at this passage again, electricity is a form of energy. It is produced by the movement of electrons. Um, it's already being defined for me. So the context clue that's being used here is definition. And if I were reading through this, I would put that in my annotations on the side and I would write definition because this is what this sample text is. And it's already defining the word for me. There's no need for me to look it up. Another sample text here. Hydraulic systems use liquids under pressure to move many things. Huge amounts of soil at a construction site can be moved with hydraulic machinery such as backhoes and excavators. So there's two different context clues appearing in this sentence. Hydraulic systems is the word in question, and a descriptor is added. So, hydraulic systems use liquids under pressure to move many things. So, while I might not know what a hydraulic system is, I know it's something that uses liquids and pressure to move things, right? So, that would be a description since it's not a direct definition, but the context clue here is description, which helps me understand the word hydraulic systems a bit more. The other context clue being used in this sentence is an example, and that comes with hydraulic machinery. So even if I don't know what hydraulic machinery is, I'm given some examples of that, such as backhoes and excavators. And as I read through this example, this context clue, I can understand that hydraulic machinery is probably something very big and something that requires a lot of heavy machinery, like backhoes and excavators. So even if I don't know what that is, I can at least understand the concept so that I can continue reading. The next text sample is oil from the tank is sent along a conductor, a hose or pipe, to a pump where it is pushed into a cylinder or metal pipe. A cylinder is like a large syringe. So again, conductor, right? I don't know what that word means, but there's a parenthetical note, just as I said here. The meaning of the unfamiliar word is provided in parentheses directly following the word. And that's what this parenthetical note is doing is that even though I don't know what that is, I can assume it's a hose or pipe based on the parenthetical note left by the writer. There's also cylinder, right? So if I don't know what that is, at least there's a comparison there to help me, is like a large syringe. So this gives me a better understanding, the context clue of comparison, because I'm given an example or a comparison, a large syringe to visualize what a cylinder might be. Again, if I was reading through this, I would be taking notes in the margins to help me remember what each word means so that I can understand the overall concept once I'm done reading. The fourth sample text is to find out more about atoms, scientists want to make particles move even faster. A machine called a super collider will do this. Figure 2.1 shows how this machine works. So again, I don't know what super collider is, but I can read or look at figure 2.1 to understand what that machine looks like, which is the context clue of illustration, right? So although super collider isn't defined or described or even compared to anything, there's at least an illustration that will help me understand what this word means, and to understand the concept a bit deeper. So all of this could be put together into one paragraph, but even in one paragraph, there's various context clues that will help me understand different words. And again, they're all various types of context clues. I didn't cover all of them in this example, but there are different other context clues like clarification, um, and elaboration in typography and design. But again, looking at context clues will help you understand concepts quicker and it'll make your reading process more smooth. So we're going to move on to the next activity. For this activity, you will need to pick a paragraph or passage from a textbook or a book you're currently reading. Be sure to pick one that you might be currently having trouble with or a part that you have not read yet. As you read, find at least 3 different context clues. Um, on your worksheet, you will write out the sentence with the context clue and underline or bold the clue in the sentence. You will also label the clue in the provided table on your worksheet. So there is a table on your worksheet so that you can type in the 3 different examples you find along with the context clue that's present. So you're going to make it look sort of like this, where you write the sentence and bold or underline the word that you had trouble with and the kind of context clue that you used to help you understand what the word meant. Once you've read through the passage and identified at least 5 different context clues, or sorry, that should read three different context clues, reflect on your reading process. Describe how you use context to understand what you read. For example, did you look for certain types of clues more than others? Did you using context clues help your understanding of the text overall? So go ahead and complete this table as you read something from one of your currently assigned readings, and then reflect on your reading process. If you're not currently reading something for class, you can also Google a news article and read through that and use this activity. So go ahead and pause here, complete the activity, and resume once you're finished. All right, so I hope you had enough time. If not, you can continue pausing and resume once you're finished. So, this is a summary of what we learned today. Reading is a process of finding meaning in text. Every time you read, you're always trying to decode and uncover meaning. Writers use a variety of ways to convey words and concepts. And as readers, you must find these ways in the form of context clues, which we reviewed. Using context clues to help you understand a reading will help you decode a text more effectively and efficiently. Now, in this workshop, we're doing a much more in depth process where I ask you to look for those sentences and find those context clues. But as you get used to looking at context clues, it will become second nature to you. You just need to practice just like any other skill. So that's the end of this workshop. For my works cited, I did use Think Literacy Cross Curricular Approaches. There's a link if you want to check it out, but it is meant mostly for teachers. And if you do have more questions about how to read effectively, or if you have a writing question, you can also visit our virtual writing support center. Our hours are Monday through Thursday, 9 to 7. Fridays 9 to 2, and then we are closed on holidays. But if you need any assistance, I strongly recommend you check out our virtual writing support center and meet with one of our tutors. We also have handouts available on the Canvas page, along with more workshops on writing and reading topics. So please check those out if you still have questions. Thank you, and I hope to see you at the next workshop.